Listeners, hope you guys all had a wonderful holiday. Today, we are creeping up on the end of 2023 and about to be in 24. So we're going to talk about some couple goals. And I know some of y'all are already thinking, we're going to set goals and whatnot, but we're going to kind of recap our 2023 and then kind of look at some areas where we can all work on and grow and get better.
Yeah, I mean, this time of year, it kind of inspires you or can depress you at times. Just kind of thinking about how your year went and really looking forward to the new coming year, kind of starting a new season or a new chapter in your life. So we are going to take the positive side of it, right?
Yes.
But then we'll also kind of look back at what we were able to accomplish during the year 2023 and then kind of walk you guys through what we plan to do this year in preparation of getting into 2024. So today we're going to talk about couples goals, as Brittany has stated, and we're going to introduce this new method that we're going to try to execute this year, and it's called the RAG method, where we're going to reflect, we're going to assess, and then we're going to goal set. So we'll kind of walk you through that.
And so just to kind of recap on 23, we always choose a word for the year. And so wrapping up 23, our word of the year was execution. And we always talk about, so that, the only difference between an idea and something coming to fruition is you executing that idea. And so this has been a year that we said we're not going to talk about it anymore. We're going to be about it.
Yeah,
So we've done that.
As we've already told you all before, we've been thinking about this podcast for 3 or 4 years now, since 2019, 2020. And this year we're like, look, enough talking about it. And like Brittany said, ideas are only ideas unless you're actually going to put some muscle behind it and actually execute. So Brittany was like, why don't we make this our year of execution? And I just loved that thought, because there's often times where we come up with all these amazing ideas, all these thoughts. Sometimes we write them down, sometimes we don't, sometimes we journal, sometimes we don't. We have conversations with friends, but we don't pull the trigger on it. So this was our year of execution, and man, did we execute.
Yes, and that doesn't mean we're going to stop executing, but I just think it was a great motivation for us at the beginning of the year. We said, this is the month we're going to do it. This is what we're going to do, and it's been great. So, and now we're coming up on 24, and we've been discussing, actually Byron had come up with it a couple weeks ago. We were talking about it, and he was like, that's the word for the year.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to share it or you want me to share it.
Go ahead,
you want me to share it?
Yeah.
So our word of the year is verve, which, just basically means like good spirits and good energy and enthusiasm. And really, if you listen to our relational energy, I don't want to like totally go back to that, but some of that same kind of thing, just making sure we're auditing our circle again, making sure that we're being enthusiastic and making good choices and just having a good spirit around us, right? That I know we've talked about this before, but just keeping that good enthusiasm and keep that motivation to move forward.
Yeah, optimism, enthusiasm, excitement. And we want to introduce or welcome those words into our lives because it really prohibits you from executing if you don't think about the optimistic or enthusiastic side of some of the things you want to achieve, right? And so that was kind of the things that were hindering us from actually executing, because we're thinking about all the negative things that can happen. What if I lose money? What if I lose friends? What if people think differently of me? You know what? Sometimes you got to let that stuff go and just actually take action and see what happens. And I'll tell you what, like, we've had great feedback, some great positive feedback on this podcast. And again, we were thinking about it for so long because we didn't know how people were going to welcome it, how it was going to work out. But at the end of the day, it was our passion, something that we really wanted to do. And if people follow and want to listen, great. If they don't, that's fine too, right? But we want to welcome verve into our life, enthusiasm, optimism, being enthusiastic about different aspects and things we want to achieve. So that way will motivate us to continue to do those things down the road.
Yes, and I think that's part of our vision too, right? Is to reach out to other couples, to have a safe space that you can know you're not crazy, you're relatable, you have things that are happening in your relationships that everyone has and everyone experiences. So I think that's good. And I know me and Byron are the two that always like, oh, we don't set goals at the year because, you should always be working on these things. So I want to be careful with that. But at the same time, I also want to make sure that if you've never set goals at the beginning of the year, and if you've never sat down as a couple and set a goal, now might be the time, I know it doesn't have to be January 1st, but man, it's a great time to stop and reflect right before you hit that button for, you're stuck in winter. If you live in where we live, you're stuck in winter. And, it's dark, you're in the house. Now's the time to kind of
Yeah.
reassess. And I really think that without these goals and without this discussion, you fail yourself in the sense of this is our roadmap, right? This is our
Yeah.
roadmap. And without a roadmap, what happens? We get lost. Without our
Right.
phones, we get lost, right? Without our GPS. So it's our roadmap to success.
For sure. And maybe you don't think it's going to equal failure, right? And that's fair. That's a fair assessment. But you may not be able to reach your relationship's maximum potential. And that's where we want to go, right? We
Yeah.
want to continue making purposefully our relationship better and better and better. And so this is always cyclical. And the reason why we're saying, hey, do it at the end of the year is because it's a natural cycle that we already know, right? It's at the end of the year and we're about to start a new year. So why not do it now? And like to Brittany's point, we had never thought about creating purposeful goals and being super deliberate, writing things down, almost like it's a caucus of our marriage. But we want to introduce again intentionality and deliberation into our relationship, and so that's what we have decided to do from this point forward. So with that, we understand too that life's conveniences can really dictate how you approach your relationship, right? In that sense, I'm talking about like actually taking time out to write down some of your goals and kind of reflect and assess and goal set for your relationship's potential. So there's a lot of distractions that enter your life. You got basketball games for your kids. You're taking kids to school. You're going on dates with your spouse. You have friends. You have family that are all going to take up some of that time. But it's also important, though, that you take a little bit of time aside to assess your relationship too, so that you can goal set. Because again, it can take away some of the purpose of your life, your individuality, but then also your relationship too.
Yeah, and I like that you said individuality too, because when you're setting these goals, I think you have to find that that fluid balance between your individual goals and your marriage goals. And so just make sure you're keeping that in perspective.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. We had financial goals, let's say, and usually it's one person that's maybe not always 100% on board, asking for a friend.
I wonder who that could be.
That maybe likes to do more things than they probably should. And so it's important to make sure if you have these goals and you discuss and you reassess them, it kind of brings you back to reality.
Yeah.
So like if you're sitting here and you're listening right now and you're like, well, what kind of goals should I be focusing on or thinking about? I mean, there's literally anything under the sun. You can talk about financial goals. You can talk about, retirement goals, travel goals, health goals. How does that look? Because when you write these goals down and you set them, it almost creates, and I know we talked about expectations, but these create expectations that we can have a good, healthy expectation because we've discussed it and it's
Right.
part of the roadmap.
Yeah.
And so now we're going to move forward with it.
I like it. And it's a shared expectation, right? Because we've
Right.
talked about it. And, and jokingly, I'm like, okay, who are we talking about here when you're talking about these financial goals? Who's the one that's actually, but sometimes that wavers because sometimes I'm the one that's doing too much on the financial side, but you can pull me aside and say, okay, babe, look at these goals that we set. Remember, this is what we're trying to execute, right? And it's a great reminder of what we're trying to do on this roadmap.
Yes. And I think that reminds me too, I think we need to tell ourselves this too, is sometimes you're going to fail in these goals, and maybe not 100% you won't fail, but you have to reassess, and it takes your partner to say, hey, you're really screwing this up right now, and in a non-judgmental way, it's a safe space. We are going to fail. We're going to continue to fail. We are humans, and that's just what it is. Failure is feedback. So we're just going to
Tell them.
keep moving forward. But I think it's important not to judge your person if they're not meeting that. Let's reassess. Maybe that goal is too outlandish. We need to bring it down. I don't know, just something like that.
And that's okay. And can we just go down the rabbit hole a little bit on failure as feedback? Can you kind of share with the people what you mean by that?
Sure. So basically, anytime you think that you failed at something, it's just feedback, how to get better, how to change it, how to do it differently, maybe correct it. I think we've all been to a job interview where you walk out and you're like, man, I just jacked that up, And then you get that feedback from, the person says, I'm sorry, we didn't hire you for these reasons. Okay, so next time I'm going to make sure I study this. I'm going to make sure I go on with this. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to wear this, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe failure to you means you couldn't run a couple miles. Well, okay, that's all right. We have feedback. Now I know I need to walk a mile and then run a half mile and then walk until I get there. So it's
Yeah.
always feedback. There is no such thing as failure. We put that failure on. I heard the other day something that said, we've survived 100% of our worst days thus far. So why are
Ooh,
we stopping now?
man,
We're still here.
that's good.
And I know you asked me to talk about failures feedback, but we just spoke to a gentleman at our son's birthday party. He was telling us he was older and he was saying that he wanted to go back to school. And he was like, oh, I'm just so embarrassed. I just should have got my degree. And, he had all these things and I don't know. And I'm like sitting there listening. I'm like, he was so concerned about what other people were going to think. And I literally said to him, so what?
Yeah.
Who cares?
That was so timely.
You.
That was so timely.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in his 40s and, he has children that are the same age as our sons. They play with each other a lot. We had no idea that, his situation.
Yeah.
And he was so welcoming and so, wanting to share his story. And he did. And was so timely because we were able to just talk to him about, the outside perception does not matter. You know what I'm saying? And that's, again, one of those distractions that prevents you from really meeting your potential.
Yes.
You're so concerned about what people on the outside are telling you to do or not to do. And it's a them problem. It's not a you problem. Keep doing you.
Yes. It's a
keep succeeding.
worldly timeline they're trying to take your worldly timelines and throw them in the trash.
Yeah.
I'm not too old. I'm not too young. I'm not too dumb. I'm not too get rid of it. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Those are worldly timelines. We can do what we want when we want.
Yeah, and that's why verve is so important. And I don't want to go too much into verve because we're going to have an episode, probably our next episode, where we're talking specifically about verve and why that word matters. But in this case, yeah, it's really important that you introduce that verve into your life because it can help you dismiss some of those negative accounts that will prevent you from making, great decisions on your life, and being afraid of making mistakes or being a failure, and I air quotes there, failure, again, does not help you. Now, let's rewind just a little bit there, right? Risk taking is important, right? I really think that equals growth. But, let's make some good risks, right? Let's make some calculated risks. So what Brittany and I do is we always ask each other, okay, what is the worst thing that can happen with this decision?
Yeah, let's run that back, right?
Yeah. What is the worst thing that can happen? If the worst thing that can happen is no one's going to like that podcast, okay, we pressing. You know what I'm saying? Now, if the worst thing that can happen is someone can end up in the hospital, maybe we need to assess this a little bit more. We need to, analyze this decision a little bit more. But that's why it's so important, right, to sit there and write down with your partner or just even amongst yourself and then share later, what some of those ideas are, why you're making that risk, why it matters, what's your purpose behind it, and then press from there.
And I think that kind of dives into a little bit too, is like, what is your passions too, right? What is important to you as a couple? And that will kind of put forward, this is what we do. And I'll give you like a small example. And you've probably heard me say before that health is really important in our house. Yeah. And some, the holidays just came, so I'm just all the way off the bandwagon right now. Like we just been drinking eggnog and doing all the things. But
mixing eggnog and the stuff that ain't supposed to be mixed with, just doing too much.
Doing way too much. But like I said, failure, it's not even failure. It's, you've got to give yourself some leeway sometimes. So whenever you have a goal set in mind, I'm going to eat healthy come January 1st. Mm-hmm. It's important to relay that personal goal to your spouse, because if your spouse has a financial goal, let's say, and you guys have, and he's like, they're like, I'm going to save money. Well, eating healthy is not cheap. And so it's important to kind of incorporate that. It's also important that you discuss these goals, because you're not going to be able to maintain them without talking about them, seeing them, writing them down, looking at them, and preparing yourself to maintain them. Yeah. So I say that because if I tell you I'm going to eat healthy for the first month of January, and then you see me eating stuff that I'm not supposed to, I said I wasn't, I need that accountability. And I also need you to be on board to say, hey, Brittany, bring it back. I
Yeah.
need that. And that may not be for everybody. I'm not saying that. That's a small example in our household.
Yeah.
But I need that accountability.
Right. And you do. And the hardest part, though, is the accountability piece. No one wants to be held accountable, right? Especially as a full grown adult. Like, you think that you already have life figured out. But that's why it's important, right, to set your goals early before those things become an issue so that they can remind you, right? So think about, that old saying where, like, you don't want to go to the grocery store on an empty stomach, right? Because you
Right.
keep on getting all this extra stuff. Well, let's not set our goals after, right, it's too late, right? So let's go ahead and set those goals early. That way we can always go back and have that accountability partner.
You're so right. And I think
Yeah.
writing, like for us, writing it down, I know we have a little board in our kitchen that we write little motivational things. And it's just a reminder. I know we were going through a big piece of thing at our job that we were both attaining to get a couple years ago. And luckily we were able to attain that goal. But it was those little reminders written down to say, this is your goal. This is what you said you wanted. So if that means you as a couple like to do a vision board, maybe do something like that. Write it down, revisit it. Let me give you a crazy example. Byron and I did premarital counseling before we got married.
Yeah.
And he told us to write down on that list everything that we would want in our lives. And I kid you not, we came across it. Was it just like a couple months ago?
Yeah.
We came
Yep.
across that list. And so many of those things are checked off now.
Isn't that crazy?
And it was so cool.
Yeah, I got
so
goosebumps.
cool.
And it's funny because we didn't really ever go back and look at those goals that we set prior to us getting married 14 years ago. So what's cool about that, though, it makes me really feel as though those goals were value-based goals, right? And so when we talk about goals, yeah, and Brittany had kind of alluded to it, you can have goals about anything. Right, anything. It could be about anything. I want to learn how to dunk. I want to.
Right.
I want
Speak a
to.
new language,
Right.
you know?
It could be about anything. But when we're talking about goals in this context, we're talking about value-based goals that will create a better environment for your family and a better growing, healthy relationship, which means to me that you've got to make value-based goals. So first step, think about what you value individually, right? Your partner does the same. Then you share those goals amongst each other. You share those values amongst each other, right? And then we decide as a couple, what are our values in our relationship?
Right.
And then as we're making goals, we kind of triangulate or we line up or align our values to our goals. If there are goals on that list that aren't aligned with our values, then it ain't a goal, right? It ain't a goal. It's not a goal. It's not a goal that you want to achieve in your relationship. So you want to think about value-based goals. And so that's encouraging, right? To know that when we made those goals initially, prior to us even getting married, prior to us even like growing with one another,
Right.
to look at that list and see that those things were checked off is really encouraging.
Yes, it is. It's always encouraging to see your goals,
Yeah.
done properly and correctly, and you followed through,
No doubt.
And I know as married couples as well, I mean, one goal you can always focus on, and I know it seems silly, but is retirement, things like that. That can be kind of exciting, It's a
Yeah.
time to look forward to. And I know you may think like, man, y'all are young to be saying that, but it's gonna sneak up on everybody before you expect it,
Yeah.
And you were saying value-based goals. I was thinking a lot of people, when you're talking about marriage goals, we're talking about like, hard hitter goals, like this is what we want to pay off this, or we want to be at this, and we want to do this many workouts. But there's also like you were saying, interpersonal goals where we are growing as individuals. I think so many times we think it's easier to be the person everybody knows us as versus just moving forward and growing. And I think stop fighting those demons to be the person you used to be. Move forward with that growth.
Yeah.
Keep building on it.
Yeah, I like that, and it reminds me of just a really good friend of mine. Love him to death. He had wanted to provide me with some feedback on the podcast, and I was like, please give me
Yeah,
some
of
give me
course,
some
we're here for it.
feedback. Great feedback, man. Super honest feedback. But I remember one of the things he had said to me was, "You don't always have to be the professional Byron." Right, which was really kind of I didn't know how to internalize that because oftentimes I think about how I present myself and what I say, because your words do matter, right? And how you present yourself does matter. But sometimes you have to shape, the way that you communicate with people, based on, the company that you're sharing those things with, right? But I do my best every day to try to be the same person I am at home, that I am out in the street, that I am at the job. I think it's really important to figure out who you are, love yourself, and then be that all the time, right? Just be you, right? So it made me think of, like, okay, what am I doing? Is there something I need to change? Is something I need to do? But in speaking with him and then talking to another friend, it was like, well, they're used to me being who I was before, right? They're not used to me being who I am now. So he wasn't used to seeing me or hearing me speak, like that. So to your point, yeah, I mean, once you achieved or made it to a certain level, cognitively or interpersonally, or even just in the way that you communicate, continue to grow. And some people may not know that you've made that much change.
That's
right?
So true.
But that shouldn't shift, the way that you think about yourself or think that you're doing something right or wrong, if that makes any sense.
No, it does.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a long anecdote, but I just thought I wanted to share that because that is so in line with what you were just sharing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited for 2024. I think 2023 has been a good year, and I hope that we can just continue to build on this platform. I really hope some of you go out and write down your goals as a couple. I would love for you to drop some of them in the bottom just to see what you all are out there, what your goals are, and maybe it would make us even stop and say, hey, we didn't think about putting that on, our list. And also, when I say list, like, let's not be extra crazy with the goals. We know some people that I've talked to people where they're like, here's my goals for the year. And it's like 15 things. You are going to fail at that. Now, I said failure is feedback, right? So maybe your feedback is less goals.
Right, yeah.
You have to, your goals should be, able to be attained in a reasonable way or manner. Right. You need to have goals that are realistic. And so just make sure you don't put too many goals on that list. Make sure you have a couple. And if this is your first time ever doing this as a couple, then maybe you should only have a few, maybe just to learn and grow.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about it, realistic goals, attainable goals, but then also put a timetable on it, right? Say, hey, I want to accomplish this within 6 months, or I want to have this done by 8 months, right? So that way you have an end state in mind as well. So, okay, now since I have this goal in place and I want to have it done in 6 months, that means every month I need to do at least this if I'm going to reach that goal. Because I'm a huge procrastinator. Even if I say I'm gonna do it in 9 months, I'm gonna probably wait to the 7th or 8th month, right, to start doing it.
Wrong.
I'm working on that, but it does help though to put a time limit on it to really assist me in getting it done in a decent amount of time.
And I'm on the opposite spectrum of you. You tell me a goal. Like, we are at it every day for the most part. Like, I am on it.
Like this gosh darn basement that you made me do in 3 weeks.
He finished our basement. And, he had a year to do it. He finished it in 11 months. 11 and a half.
Hey, I took my time with it.
That's right. But no, it's just important.
Yeah, it is. So before we go, let's talk about the RAG method. All right. And I think this will help us and our listeners also really develop some value-based goals that matter to you and your partner, and that are realistic, attainable, and then also should have some time table to it as well. The first portion of the RAG method is reflection, right? So we want to look back at our current/previous year and kind of see, all right, what goals did I set back in 2022 for the year 2023, and how well did I do that, right? So did I make weight? Did I lose the amount of weight, or did I gain the amount of weight that I wanted to? Was I able to rekindle relationships that I wanted to rekindle? Was I able to forgive that person that has been dragging me down for X amount of years? Was I able to save up X amount of dollars? Whatever your goal was, I want you to reflect, look back and see what those goals were, and then kind of see if you were able to check those blocks off. Then the A of the RAG method is assess. So now that I've looked back at some of those goals, how well or what can I do to shift and or change those goals so that way they're more realistic, more attainable, and that there's some type of timetable associated with it, right? So I can do a better job next year of achieving those goals. So
Yeah.
this is the analysis piece, and it should take the longest amount of time if you really want to do it the right way, because reflection obviously is key, but adding some analysis to it obviously is kind of difficult, right? And not a word that we use often when we're talking about relationships, but super important to assess what some of those goals were and then what we can do to shift it coming into the next year. And then lastly, the G of the RAG method, right, is to actually goal set. So based on my reflection and based on the analysis or the assessment that I have, what are the goals that I want to set for the oncoming year? And we're super excited to hear about what some of your goals are.
Absolutely.
We do want to create, right, a community of sharing, right? We want to
Yes.
share some information. We're trying our best to share with you all what, kind of things that we do. There's no one that's perfect. We're by far not perfect. And we are seeking for you to do the same, right? So we can
Yes.
kind of sharpen each other.
Absolutely. And don't get discouraged. Just remember that all the little things you do towards those goals, even if it doesn't meet it, all those little things add up to be big things sometimes.
Yeah.
It's all the little
Yeah.
things that matter. So don't get discouraged. If it's a little victory, take your little victory and keep it moving. So we just hope everyone has fun setting their goals, but has a wonderful, blessed 2024. I hope that all the goodness comes your ways and that these goals are met.
Yes, 100%. And even if you don't do it, we're just glad that you stopped by to listen. Obviously, there's been some distractions and some challenges, right? Because there are a lot of those that happen in life. But man, so many good things are in store, and we're just so optimistic. And we're just looking forward to sharing some of that with you, and look forward also to just to hearing about some of your triumphs, even some of your tribulations, and how you plan to overcome those things as the new year comes to pass.
That's it. I think that's a good word. I think we need to go get a pen and paper and write down these goals for 2024. What about you?
No doubt. Yeah, we got some work to do. Yeah. Hey, without further ado, you already know what it is, y'all. Just be you, be blessed, just be. We out.
I'm blessed to be